Mr. Chair, Tanakwe. I rise just to take a brief call on the Prisoners and Victims 2012 Expiry and Application Date Amendment Bill during the committee stages. As we've heard, clauses 5 and 8 seek to amend the Principal Act, the Prisoners and Victims Claims Act 2005, specifically sections 16 and 17, and replace the words 30 June 2012 with 30 June 2013, so effectively extending a sunset clause. And I think it's at this point I'd like to respond to comments raised by the Honourable Phil Goff, his surprise that the Green Party was opposing this bill. I just thought I'd remind him that actually when the Green Party agreed to support the Principal Act at the third reading, it was uniquely because it was the lesser of two evils and it included a sunset clause. So it's not surprising that we would oppose this bill, which is effectively extending that sunset clause. And I believe at the time it was because the Labour government at the time didn't have the numbers to pass this legislation unless it was going to be with United Future, who wanted to amend it in ways that we found very, very troubling indeed, because they would further threaten the rights of people in prison who'd had their human rights breached. And I don't quite follow the logic here of when there's two completely separate breaches of rights, that you take the compensation from one and use it to rectify another. And we've had a breach of rights that the prisoner is serving a sentence for that is his loss of liberty, his or her loss of liberty, is a result of the breach of rights that resulted in whatever harm the victim has suffered. But the separate breach of rights, which in the case of Tonoa and the behavioral management regime was just quite a gross breach of rights on the part of the Crown, unfortunately, that's a separate breach of rights. And so it's unclear why the compensation that the prisoner would be seeking from that breach of rights should be used then for the victims of the first breach of rights. In other words, two wrongs don't make a right. And so just to connect the dots on the relationship between prisoners not having an effective remedy and potential perverse incentives that could lead to increases in breaches of human rights in prisons is that if prisoners no longer have an incentive to seek compensation when there is a gross breach of rights, well, they're less likely to seek compensation. They're less likely to take a case, and therefore the Crown is perhaps less liable for breaches of rights and is more likely to be sloppy in their administration of justice, because there won't be the incentive for them to look after the human rights of prisoners, and that's really fundamentally very, very important. Look, this bill is still part of this race to be tough on crime and support victims, but it's unclear that this bill is going to do more than perpetuate a system that at best is ineffective and at worst creates perverse incentives for the mistreatment of prisoners. The government's plans, including extending this deadline, do not substantially create a better environment for victims of crime, but do come at a heavy price to prisoners' ability to realize an effective remedy for their own victimization after they've already been serving the sentence, which is what the state decided was the price that they were paying for the crimes that they committed against their victims. And victims do have the ability to seek remedy through taking a lawsuit if they believe that they need additional financial compensation, or in some cases they're able to have their needs met by ACC. And that's a decision we've made as a society as to how we're best able to achieve justice. So for these reasons, we disagree with the amendments to Section 16 and 17 of the Principal Act. Thank you.
Darian Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.